Commander Susan Wright straightened her dark blue uniform one last time before the large metal doors opened. She took a deep breath. This moment would decide the future of humanity. "Ready, Commander?" asked Ambassador George Collins beside her. His gray hair was neatly combed and his eyes showed both hope and worry. Susan nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be, sir." The massive doors slid apart with a soft hiss, revealing a huge circular room. 17 different alien species sat at curved tables that formed a complete circle. In the center was an empty table meant for the human delegation. Susan led the way, followed by Ambassador Collins and 5 other humans who made up Earth's diplomatic team. The aliens watched them closely. Some looked curious, others seemed bored, and a few showed clear dislike on their strange faces. The Valtari representatives were easy to spot. Their purple skin and 4 eyes made them stand out among the other aliens. Susan felt a chill when she looked at them. Just 3 years ago, the Valtari had destroyed 2 human colony planets, killing nearly 30,000 people. Now they were here to talk peace. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," said a tall green alien with a voice that sounded like gentle bells. "I am Zoltek, moderator of the Galactic Conclave. You may take your place at the center table." As the humans walked to their seats, Susan noticed Lieutenant Kate Nichols scanning the room carefully. Kate was officially listed as a diplomatic aide, but she was actually their security expert. Susan caught Kate's eye and the lieutenant gave a small nod that meant everything seemed normal so far. Ambassador Collins stepped forward once they were seated. "Honorable members of the Galactic Conclave, we thank you for this opportunity. Earth and humanity are ready to join the galactic community in peace and cooperation." A low rumble of translated voices filled the room as the aliens discussed among themselves. The Valtari Supreme Envoy, Task Vor, stood up next. His 4 eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. "The Valtari Imperium acknowledges the humans' desire for peace," Task Vor said in a deep, grinding voice. "However, we must express our concerns about allowing such a young and volatile species into our ancient order." Susan clenched her jaw but kept her face calm. This was expected. The Valtari had been trying to block Earth's membership from the beginning. "With respect," Collins replied smoothly, "humanity has proven its ability to adapt and grow. The unfortunate conflict between our peoples was a result of misunderstanding, not aggression on our part." Susan knew this wasn't entirely true. When the Valtari ships had first appeared in Earth's solar system, there had been confusion and fear on both sides, but it was the Valtari who had fired first, destroying an Earth science station. The war that followed had been short but devastating. The meeting continued for 3 hours. Different alien representatives asked questions about Earth, human culture, and technology. Some seemed genuinely interested, while others were clearly looking for reasons to reject humanity's petition. When the formal session ended, the aliens announced there would be a reception to allow for more casual interaction. Susan knew this was where the real diplomacy would happen. "Stay alert," she whispered to her team as they moved to the large hall next door. "Be friendly, but remember why we're here." The reception hall was even larger than the meeting room. Food and drinks from dozens of worlds were laid out on long tables. Strange music played softly in the background. "Commander Wright?" A voice spoke behind her. Susan turned to see a small, bird-like alien with bright yellow feathers. "I am Churl, of the Avon Collective. May we speak privately?" Susan nodded and followed Churl to a quiet corner. The alien looked around carefully before speaking. "Not all of us share the Valtari's view of humans," Churl said quietly. "Some of us believe your species would bring valuable new ideas to our community." "Thank you," Susan replied. "We truly do seek peaceful relations with all species." Churl's feathers rustled slightly. "Be careful, Commander. The Valtari rarely change their minds once they decide something, and they decided long ago that humans are dangerous." Before Susan could ask what Churl meant, Lieutenant Kate Nichols appeared at her side. "Commander, sorry to interrupt," Kate said politely, but Susan could hear the tension in her voice. "Excuse us," Susan said to Churl, who nodded and moved away. What is it? Susan asked once they were alone. The Valtari guards are rotating positions too frequently, Kate said in a low voice. It's not a normal security pattern. They're positioning themselves near all the exits. Susan frowned. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. And their weapons aren't ceremonial. They're fully charged energy rifles disguised to look decorative. Susan looked across the room where Ambassador Collins was talking with a group of aliens, including Taskvor. The Valtari envoy seemed relaxed, even friendly. Maybe they're just being cautious, Susan said. This is the first time many of these species have been in the same room with humans. Kate didn't look convinced. Maybe. But something doesn't feel right. Susan scanned the room again and noticed that there were indeed more Valtari guards than before, and they were all watching the humans closely. Keep monitoring them, Susan ordered, but don't make it obvious, and tell the rest of our team to be ready to move quickly if needed. Yes, Commander. As Kate slipped away, Admiral Alan Russell, the oldest member of their delegation, joined. Susan, making friends? He asked with a small smile. Trying to, Susan replied. The Avon seems supportive at least. Russell nodded. Collins thinks we have enough votes to gain observer status at minimum. It's a start. Susan watched as a Valtari guard spoke quietly into a communication device on his wrist. I hope so, but Lieutenant Nichols is concerned about the Valtari security patterns. Russell frowned. That young woman sees danger everywhere. We're on a neutral space station with 17 different species watching. Even the Valtari wouldn't try anything here. I hope you're right, sir. As the evening went on, Susan tried to relax and focus on the diplomatic work. She spoke with representatives from several species, answering questions about Earth and human culture. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Kate was right. Something wasn't right. When she caught sight of Taskvor watching her from across the room, his 4 eyes seemed to hold a secret. And for just a moment, Susan thought she saw him smile. The third day of peace talks started normally. The human delegation arrived at the meeting chamber early. Susan checked in with each team member as they prepared their notes. Any updates from Earth? Susan asked Admiral Russell. The Admiral nodded. Regular status report came in during the night. All quiet on the home front. Lieutenant Kate Nichols approached them, her face tight with worry. Commander, the Valtari guards have doubled since yesterday. They're carrying heavier weapons now, Susan frowned. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. And they've changed the security codes for the main doors 3 times in the last hour. Something's happening. Admiral Russell shook his head. You're being paranoid. Lieutenant, this is... A soft beep from Russell's communication device interrupted him. He looked down at the small screen on his wrist and his face went pale. Admiral? Susan asked. Russell looked up, his eyes wide with shock. We need to speak privately. Now. They moved to a small side room used for private discussions. As soon as the door closed, Russell activated a small device that would prevent anyone from listening in. Earth Command just sent an emergency transmission, he said, his voice low and urgent. Long-range sensors have detected a massive Valtari fleet. At least 50 warships. Susan felt her stomach drop. Where are they headed? Directly for Earth. They'll reach our outer defenses in less than 6 hours. Kate cursed under her breath. This whole thing was a trap. The peace talks, the friendly discussions, it was all to keep us distracted. Susan's mind raced. We need to warn Earth, make sure they're ready. I already sent confirmation that we received their message, Russell said. They're mobilizing everything we have. We should confront the Valtari, Susan suggested. In front of the whole conclave, they won't be able to deny what they're doing. Russell nodded grimly. It might not help, but you're right. The other species need to see the truth. They returned to the main chamber just as the session was about to begin. Ambassador Collins noticed their serious faces and raised an eyebrow. In question. Susan gave him a small nod, their private signal that something was wrong. As Zoltek, the moderator, called the meeting to order, Admiral Russell stood up abruptly. Before we continue these talks, I must bring an urgent matter to the attention of the conclave, he said loudly. Zoltek looked surprised. This is irregular, Admiral Russell. What I have to say cannot wait. Russell insisted. He turned to face Task Vor, the Valtari Supreme Envoy. Our sensors have detected a Valtari battle fleet heading toward Earth. Would you care to explain why your empire is sending warships to attack our home world while we talk peace here? A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. Many of the alien delegates began talking at once. Task Vor remained calm, his 4 eyes blinking slowly. These are serious accusations, Admiral, Task Vor said smoothly. Perhaps your sensors are malfunctioning. Our sensors are working perfectly, Russell replied coldly. 50 Valtari warships are on a direct course for Earth, and you know it. Task Vor stood up slowly. The room fell silent. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made a sound that humans would recognize as laughter. Very observant, Admiral, Task Vor said. Yes, our fleet is indeed approaching your world, but it's too late to stop them now. Ambassador Collins stepped forward. This is an act of war. You agreed to these peace talks in good faith. Did we? Task Vor's voice was cold. The Valtari Imperium has existed for 10,000 years. We have encountered many young species like yours. Some learn their place in the galaxy. Others must be taught. Susan watched in horror as the doors to the chamber slid open and armed Valtari guards poured in. The other alien delegates began shouting in alarm. What is the meaning of this? Demanded Zoltek. This is a violation of conclave law. Task Vor ignored him. Humans are too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed free movement among the stars. Your rapid development of technology, your aggressive tendencies, you are a threat to the stability of the galaxy. The Valtari guards surrounded the human delegation, weapons raised. You won't get away with this, Susan said, her voice steady, despite her fear. Earth is not defenseless. Task Vor's upper eyes narrowed. Your planetary defenses are impressive for such a young species, but they cannot stand against the full might of the Valtari fleet. The human delegation was forced to move at gunpoint. They were taken to a large room with view screens covering one wall. The screens flickered to life, showing images of space, of Earth's defensive line around the outer planets. We thought you might wish to witness the end of your world's independence, Task Vor said, entering the room behind them. On the screens, Susan could see Earth's defense ships moving into position. There weren't many. Most of humanity's fleet was scattered across their small territory, protecting colonies and trade routes. Then the Valtari fleet appeared on the screens. The alien ships were massive, each one at least 3 times the size of Earth's largest vessels. Your species had potential, Task Force said, almost sadly. After we crush your defenses, we will not destroy your world. Humans will simply serve the Imperium, as many species do. Ambassador Collins looked broken. We came here in peace. We wanted to be allies. That was never going to happen, Task Vor replied. Susan watched the screens, her mind working furiously. There had to be something they could do. Lieutenant Nichols caught her eye and tapped her wrist twice, their signal that she had a plan. Susan gave a tiny nod. The Valtari fleet began to engage Earth's outer defenses. Flashes of weapons fire lit up the blackness of space. Earth's ships fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Commander, Admiral Russell whispered, moving closer to Susan. Broken Arrow. Susan's breath caught. Broken Arrow was the code phrase for Earth's last resort, a classified weapons program developed after the first Valtari attack 3 years ago. Something so secret that even most of the diplomatic team didn't know about it. Susan nodded slightly to show she understood. Somehow, they needed to transmit that code to Earth Command. On the other side of the room, Kate Nichols stumbled suddenly, falling against a Valtari guard. In the confusion, she managed to press something on her wrist device. What is she doing? Task Force demanded. Nothing, Kate said quickly. I just lost my balance. Task Force didn't look convinced. He gestured to one of his guards. Check her communication device, but it was too late. Kate had already sent the message, a single encrypted phrase that would reach Earth in minutes. Broken Arrow. Susan caught Kate's eye and gave her a small nod of approval. Whatever happened next, Earth would know to activate their last defense. Task 4. Turned back to the screens, unaware of what had just happened. Watch closely, humans. This is the price of defiance. Dr. Elizabeth Carter rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the computer screen. She had been working for 18 hours straight in the hidden laboratory beneath the lunar surface. Luna Base Alpha was not on any official maps. As far as the public knew, this part of the moon was empty. A red light began flashing on her console. Elizabeth sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. The emergency channel was activating. "What is it?" she asked, as the screen changed to show the worried face of General Paul Davis, Earth Defense Command. "We just received a broken arrow authorization from the diplomatic team," he said without greeting. "The Valtari fleet is approaching Earth. 50 ships at least." Elizabeth felt her heart race. "Are you sure the code is authentic?" "Yes. It came through Lieutenant Nichols' emergency channel." He paused. "You know what this means, Doctor. It's time to activate Project Prometheus." Elizabeth took a deep breath. For 3 years, she and her team had been working on technology that could give humanity a fighting chance against the technologically superior Valtari. Now that moment had come. "I understand," she said. "How long do we have?" "The Valtari fleet will breach our outer defenses in less than 5 hours. We'll be ready." Elizabeth ended the transmission and pressed an alarm button on her desk. Throughout the base, sirens began to wail. Dr. Ben Howard, her second-in-command, rushed into the lab. "Is it happening?" he asked, his face pale. Elizabeth nodded. "Get everyone to their stations. It's not a drill this time." As her team of 20 scientists gathered in the main laboratory, Elizabeth explained the situation. Some looked afraid, others determined. "We've tested the Prometheus array components separately," she told them. "Now we need to bring the whole system online. I know we plan to run more simulations, but we're out of time." "What about the risks?" asked Dr. Sandra Miller, a physicist who had been concerned about the project from the beginning. "The spatial distortions could spread beyond our control." "That's a risk we'll have to take," Elizabeth replied. "The alternative is watching Earth fall to the Valtari." The team moved quickly, each person knowing their job. The Prometheus array was not a single weapon but a network of devices placed strategically throughout the solar system. Each device was designed to create a small disruption in spacetime. When activated together, they would create a cascading effect that could tear apart anything caught in the field. At least that was the theory. While Elizabeth and her team worked, Major Frank Peters prepared for a different mission. In a small room nearby, he briefed his squad of 12 Special Forces soldiers. "Our diplomatic team is being held captive on the Conclave station," he told them. "Our mission is to get them out before the Valtari realize what's happening." "How are we going to dock with the station without being detected?" asked Sergeant John Bell. Major Peters pointed to a holographic display showing a small, sleek ship. "This is the Nightshade. Stealth technology experimental engine. It can get us there." "And how do we find our people once we're aboard?" asked another soldier. Lieutenant Nichols activated her emergency beacon when she sent the broken arrow code. "It's very weak to avoid detection, but it will guide us to their location." The soldiers began checking their gear, special suits that would protect them in space and from energy weapons, along with their own weapons. "We leave in 30 minutes, Peters said. "Earth's fleet will engage the Valtari to buy us time. It's going to be close." Back in the main laboratory, Elizabeth connected her computer to the main control system. On a large screen, she could see the status of all 12 Prometheus devices spread across the solar system. "Begin power-up sequence," she ordered. Her team worked quickly, their fingers flying over keyboards and control panels. One by one, the status icons on the screen changed from red to yellow as each device powered up. "Dr. Carter," called Ben from his station. "The calculations show that the distortion field will be much stronger than we predicted." Elizabeth frowned. "How much stronger?" "At least 3 times our original estimates. The effect could extend beyond the Valtari fleet." Elizabeth thought quickly. If the field was that strong, it could potentially affect Earth ships as well. but they had no time to recalculate everything. "Send a warning to Earth Command," she said. "Tell them to pull our ships back at least 5 light minutes from the engagement zone." As the warning was sent, a message came in from Major Peters. His team was ready to launch. "Good luck, Major," Elizabeth said when he appeared on her screen. Peters nodded. "You too, Doctor. Just make sure there's still a home for us to come back to." On the Conclave station, Susan Wright and the other human diplomats were still being held prisoner. Through the view screens, they watched as Earth's ships fought bravely against the overwhelming Valtari force. "Our defenses are falling, Admiral," Russell said quietly. "They'll reach Earth within hours." Susan looked at Lieutenant Nichols. "Did your message get through?" Kate nodded slightly. "The confirmation light on my device blinked. They received it." "Then there's still hope," Susan said. Ambassador Collins looked defeated. "What hope? You've seen the size of their fleet. We never stood a chance." "Don't be so sure," Admiral Russell told him. "There's more to Earth's defenses than you know." Task Vor, who had been watching the battle with satisfaction, turned toward them. "Your ships fight well for such primitive vessels. It will not save them." Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the station. A Valtari guard rushed into the room. "Supreme Envoy," the guard said urgently, "we have detected an unknown vessel approaching the station. It does not match any known design." Task Force's 4 eyes widened slightly. "Scan it. Find out what it is." "We cannot, sir. Our scanners cannot lock onto it." Susan felt a spark of hope. That sounded like one of Earth's new stealth ships. "Take the humans to a more secure location," Task Force ordered. "Post extra guards." As the humans were led through the station's corridors, Susan tried to memorize the route. If rescue was coming, they needed to be ready. Back at Luna Base Alpha, the final preparations for Project Prometheus were almost complete. "All devices are at full power," Ben reported. "Ready to activate on your command." Elizabeth looked at the battle display. Earth's ships were falling back, following her warning. The Valtari, thinking they were retreating in defeat, pressed forward. "This is it?" Elizabeth said. She opened a secure channel to Earth Command. "General Davis, we are ready to activate Prometheus." The general's face appeared on screen. "Understood, Doctor. You have authorization to proceed." Elizabeth took a deep breath and looked around at her team. They had worked for 3 years for this moment. Now they would find out if their creation would save humanity or make things worse. "Activate Prometheus," she ordered. Ben pressed the final sequence of commands. On the screen, all 12 status icons turned green. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, in the emptiness of space between Earth and the Valtari fleet, a strange distortion appeared. It looked like the fabric of space itself was beginning to ripple and tear. The Prometheus array had been activated. Humanity had unleashed its ultimate weapon. The Valtari commander Descor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human fleet retreat. Victory seemed certain. His ship, the Dominance, was the largest in the Valtari fleet, a massive vessel that could destroy a small moon. "The humans are falling back faster than expected," said his second-in-command. "Their resistance is crumbling. As I predicted," Descor replied. "They know they cannot win. Soon Earth will—" He stopped suddenly. Something strange was happening in the space between his fleet and the retreating human ships. The stars seemed to waver, as if seen through heat rising from a road. "What is that?" he demanded, pointing at the main view screen. His science officer studied the readings on her console. "Unknown, Commander. Our sensors detect a disruption in space-time itself." "A weapon?" Descor asked, feeling a flicker of concern. "Impossible," the science officer said. "No species has the technology to manipulate space-time as a weapon." The distortion grew larger. Space itself seemed to fold and twist in impossible ways. Then, without warning, it expanded outward in all directions. When it reached the nearest Valtari ships, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The ships didn't explode. They twisted. Metal hulls bent and stretched as if made of clay. Crew members screamed as their bodies distorted in the same way. 3. Valtari cruisers were pulled apart completely, their fragments swirling in the bizarre energies of the distortion field. "Turn the fleet around," Descor ordered, real fear in his voice now. "Maximum speed, get us away from that thing." But it was too late. The distortion field moved faster than his ships could flee. When it reached the Dominance, Descor felt his body stretching in directions that shouldn't be possible. His last thought before everything went dark was that the humans were not as primitive as the Valtari had believed. On the Conclave station, alarms were blaring. The Valtari guards were in a state of panic, shouting into their communication devices. "What's happening?" Ambassador Collins asked as the guards led the human prisoners down a corridor. "I don't know," Susan replied, "but something big is going on." The station shook suddenly, throwing everyone off balance. Susan fell against a wall and Lieutenant Nichols used the confusion to her advantage. In one quick move, she disarmed the nearest guard and knocked him unconscious. "Now," she shouted. Admiral Russell, despite his age, moved with surprising speed. He tackled another guard while Susan grabbed the fallen guard's weapon. The remaining 2 guards raised their weapons, but Susan was faster, firing 2 quick shots that sent them crumpling to the floor. "Is everyone all right?" Susan asked, looking at the shaken diplomats. "What did you do?" Ambassador Collins asked, looking at the fallen guards. "Stun setting," Susan explained. "They'll wake up with headaches, nothing more." "We need to find a way off this station," Admiral Russell said. "Whatever's happening out there, I don't think. We want to be here when the Valtari realize their fleet is in trouble." Kate checked her small wrist device. "The emergency beacon is still active. If Earth sent a rescue team, they should be able to find us." The station shook again, more violently this time. Warning lights began to flash in the corridor. "Station, integrity compromised," said an automated voice in several languages. "All personnel proceed to escape pods." "That doesn't sound good," Susan said. "Let's move." They made their way through the corridors, avoiding panicked aliens and Valtari guards. Through viewport windows, they could see the strange distortion in space growing larger. "What is that?" Ambassador Collins asked, staring at the swirling, twisting region of space. "Project Prometheus," Admiral Russell said quietly. "Our last resort." Before he could explain further, they turned a corner and came face to face with 6 armed Valtari guards led by Task Force himself. The Valtari Supreme Envoy's 4 eyes narrowed in anger. "You," he hissed at Susan, "your species has done something unforgivable." Susan raised her stolen weapon, but she knew they were outnumbered. Then, from behind the Valtari group, a section of wall exploded inward. Through the smoke stepped Major Frank Peters and his rescue team, weapons raised. "Down!" Peters shouted. Susan and her team dropped to the floor as Peters' soldiers fired. The Valtari guards fell quickly, but Task Force managed to dive behind a pillar. "Commander Wright?" Peters called. "Here, Major," Susan replied. "All of us are safe." "We need to move now," Peters said urgently. "Our ship is docked at access point E17. We have 20 minutes before this whole station could be affected by the distortion field." They moved quickly through the station, following Peters' team. Around them, aliens of all species were rushing to escape pods. The entire conclave was evacuating. "What exactly is Project Prometheus?" Susan asked Admiral Russell as they ran. "A weapon unlike anything we've built before," Russell replied. "It creates disruptions in the fabric of space-time itself. Dr. Carter and her team developed it after we captured and studied Valtari technology from the First War." "Is it controllable?" Susan asked, worried. Russell didn't answer immediately. "That's the question, isn't it?" They reached the docking bay where the Nightshade waited, its sleek black hull almost invisible against the darkness of space. As they approached the ship, a shot rang out. One of Peters' soldiers fell with a cry of pain. "Take cover," Peters shouted. From behind a stack of cargo containers, Task Force emerged, holding a large energy weapon. His purple skin was darker with rage. "You cannot escape," he shouted. "None of us can escape what you've done." Peters signaled to his team, and they laid down covering fire while Susan and the diplomats made a run for the ship. Ambassador Collins stumbled, and Susan helped him to his feet. "Almost there," she encouraged him. Peters and his team backed toward the ship, still exchanging fire with Task Force. The Valtari envoy was a surprisingly good shot, keeping them pinned down. "Go!" Peters shouted to Susan. "Get everyone on board." Susan helped the last diplomat onto the ship, then turned to see Peters take a hit to his shoulder. He fell to one knee but continued firing. "Major!" Susan called out. She rushed back down the ramp, firing her weapon to provide cover. She reached Peters and helped him to his feet. "That was stupid," he grunted, blood soaking his uniform. "You're welcome," Susan replied, half dragging him toward the ship. A final shot from Task Force hit the wall near them as they made it up the ramp. The ship's door closed behind them, and the pilot immediately began the undocking procedure. Through the ship's viewports, they watched as the nightshade pulled away from the conclave station. In the distance, they could see the expanding distortion field. It was growing faster than predicted, already consuming what remained of the Valtari fleet. "My God," Ambassador Collins whispered, watching the destruction. "What have we done?" Admiral Russell stood beside him, his face grim. "We've survived, for now." The nightshade accelerated away from the station, racing to get clear of the distortion field's path. On the main view screen, they could see Earth ships also fleeing the area. "Will it stop?" Susan asked Russell. "The distortion field?" The Admiral shook his head slowly. "I don't know, that's up to Dr. Carter now." 6 months had passed since the day humanity unleashed Project Prometheus. Commander Susan Wright stood before the window in her office on Earth, looking up at the night sky. The stars didn't look the same anymore. In 3 sectors of space, strange distortions were still visible, twisting light in unusual ways. Scientists called them Prometheus scars. A soft beep from her desk interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Admiral Russell's face on her screen. "It's time, Commander," he said. "The transport leaves in 1 hour." Susan nodded. "I'll be ready." Today was an important day. The Galactic Conclave was meeting again for the first time since the disaster. And this time, Earth would attend not as a petitioner seeking membership, but as a full member. Fear had accomplished what diplomacy could not. Susan changed into her formal uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and clean. As she fastened the final button, she paused to look at her reflection. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. They all did. The shuttle trip to the new conclave station was quiet. Ambassador Collins sat next to Susan, reviewing notes on his tablet. The old station had been destroyed when the Prometheus distortions spread beyond control. 3 entire star systems had been affected, creating permanent navigational hazards that ships could not safely enter. "Nervous?" Collins asked, breaking the silence. "A little," Susan admitted. "We're not going to be very popular." Collins gave a small, sad smile. "No, but we'll be respected, or at least feared." The new station came into view through the shuttle windows. It was larger than the previous one, orbiting a neutral star far from any populated worlds. As they docked, Susan saw ships from many different species, including a few she didn't recognize. "The Valtari are here," Collins noted, pointing to a distinctive purple ship. Susan was surprised. "I didn't think they would come." "They lost nearly their entire battle fleet," Collins said. "They can't afford another conflict right now." A small greeting party met them at the docking bay. Zoltek, the green moderator, was there. He looked the same as before, but his manner was more formal, less friendly. "Representatives of Earth," he said with a slight bow. "The conclave welcomes you." Susan, Collins, and the other humans followed him through the station to the main chamber. As they entered, all conversation stopped. Representatives from 17 species turned to look at them. Some faces showed fear, others anger. A few simple curiosity. The empty table waiting for them was no longer in the center of the room, but along the outer edge, like all the others. Equality, not supplication. When they were seated, Zoltek called the meeting to order. "Today we welcome Earth as a full member of the Galactic Conclave," he announced. As the first order of business, Commander Susan Wright will address the assembly regarding the event now known as the Prometheus incident. Susan stood slowly and looked around the room. How could she explain what had happened? How could she justify what they had done? 6 months ago, she began, my species faced extinction. The Valtari Imperium launched an unprovoked attack on our homeworld while pretending to engage in peace talks. The Valtari representative, not Taskvor, but a smaller, older individual, shifted uncomfortably but did not speak. We used a weapon we had developed but hoped never to need, Susan continued. We knew it was powerful. We did not know it would create permanent damage to the fabric of space itself. Susan took a deep breath. 3 star systems have been rendered uninhabitable. The affected areas continue to expand, though much more slowly than before. Our scientists are working day and night to find a way to stop or reverse the damage. A tall, thin alien with blue skin stood up. Your weapon has created navigational hazards across 3 sectors of space. Trade routes that have existed for millennia are now unusable. We understand, Collins said. Earth is prepared to offer assistance in establishing new routes and to provide compensation for affected worlds. Another representative, one of the bird-like Avon, spoke next. The question remains, can humanity be trusted with such power? What is to stop you from using this weapon again? Susan looked directly at the Avon. Project Prometheus has been decommissioned. All research data has been secured. We have learned a painful lesson about wielding power we don't fully understand. The chamber fell silent. Then the Valtari representative stood. The Imperium acknowledges its role in these events, he said, his voice old and tired. Our attack was ordered by the previous High Command, who have since been removed from power. The new leadership seeks peaceful relations with all species, including humans. Susan was surprised by this admission. The Valtari were not known for acknowledging mistakes. As the meeting continued, various issues were discussed: trade agreements, territorial boundaries, scientific cooperation. Earth was now part of these discussions, a powerful voice that could not be ignored. When the session ended, Susan stayed behind as the others filed out. She found herself alone with Zoltek. An impressive performance, Commander, he said. It wasn't a performance, Susan replied. We genuinely regret the damage caused by Prometheus. Perhaps, but not enough to share the technology with the Conclave, so it can be properly contained. Susan shook her head. That technology is too dangerous to share. Dr. Carter and her team are the only ones who fully understand it, and even they were surprised by its effects. Zoltek studied her with his large eyes. My species has existed for 1,000,000 years, Commander. We have seen many young races rise. Some bring art, music, philosophy. Others bring only new ways to destroy. And which are we? Susan asked. That remains to be seen, he replied. Later, back on the shuttle returning to Earth, Susan sat alone, thinking about Zoltek's words. Through the window, she could see one of the Prometheus scars, a twisted region of space that glowed with strange energies. Her communication device beeped. It was Dr. Elizabeth Carter. Commander, Elizabeth said when Susan answered, I wanted you to know, we've made progress. With containing the distortions? Susan asked hopefully. Yes. Our latest tests show we might be able to stabilize the affected regions, stop them from expanding further. That's good news, Susan said. The best I've heard in months. Elizabeth hesitated. There's something else. In studying the distortion fields, we've discovered something unexpected. The spatial warping doesn't just destroy, it also creates new forms of matter, new physical laws. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying we might have accidentally discovered something revolutionary, a new understanding of physics that could change everything. Energy production, space travel, medicine. Susan thought about this. Out of destruction, creation, out of a terrible weapon, a chance for redemption. Keep this between us for now, Susan told her, until we understand it better. As the shuttle approached Earth, Susan looked back at her home planet. Humanity had survived, but at a terrible cost. They had shown the galaxy both their worst and best qualities, their capacity for destruction and their will to survive. Now they had a chance to show something else, their ability to learn from mistakes, to rebuild what was broken, to find light in the darkness they had created. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, Susan felt hope.